The manila envelope sat on Detective Sarah Mitchell's desk, like it had been waiting 26 years to arrive. Inside, a single sheet of paper with a DNA match that would finally answer the question that had haunted a small Montana town since 1998. The name on that paper belonged to someone who had been hiding in plain sight all along, someone nobody had thought to suspect because he was just part of the scenery, invisible in the way that only the most ordinary people can be. But before we get to that moment of terrible clarity, we need to go back. Back to a morning that should have been filled with joy, to a day that was supposed to be the happiest of a young woman's life, to the moment when everything changed in the time it takes to walk from one room to another. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all our latest cases. Let's go back to June 14, 1998, in Fergus County, Montana, where Samantha Rivers was about to become Samantha Holton. Or at least, that's what everyone thought. Part 1. The Morning That Should Have Been Perfect. The sun came up over the Judith Mountains that Saturday morning, painting the wheat fields gold across the small town of Lewistown, Montana. Population 5,813. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where you didn't lock your doors during the day, and where a wedding was the event the whole town talked about for weeks. But Samantha Rivers had been locking her doors, every single one, for the past 3 weeks. At 24 years old, Sam should have been thinking only about her wedding day, about marrying Dave Holton, the reliable mechanic from Morrison's auto shop who'd proposed to her 8 months earlier on a hiking trail overlooking the Missouri River. But lately, she'd been thinking about something else, something she couldn't quite explain, the feeling of being watched. It had started small, a prickling sensation on the back of her neck when she walked to her car, the sense that someone had been standing outside her window. Twice, she'd found footprints in the dirt beneath her bedroom window at the Rivers family home on Plum Street, the red brick house her grandfather had built in 1952. When she mentioned it to her mother, Patricia had blamed neighborhood kids cutting through the yard. But Sam knew better. Kids didn't stand still in one spot for that long. By 7 a.m. on June 14, 1998, the house was buzzing with activity, and Sam tried to push those dark thoughts away. This was her wedding day. Her mother was making coffee in the kitchen. Her younger sister Jenny, 17, was frantically curling her hair in the bathroom, and her best friend since 3rd grade, Rebecca Walsh, had arrived at 6:45 with donuts and enough makeup to supply a department store. "You're actually doing this," Rebecca said, grinning. "You're actually marrying Dave Holton." Sam laughed, trying to match her friend's energy. She was wearing sweatpants and an old Lewistown high school t-shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. But something in her eyes didn't quite match her smile. "Beck," she said quietly, glancing toward the kitchen to make sure her mother couldn't hear. "Did you see anyone outside when you came in?" Rebecca's smile faded. "Sam, not today. Please, you said you were going to stop worrying about that." "I know, it's wedding day jitters. That's all it is." Rebecca squeezed her hand. "Dave's one of the good ones. You're safe. Everything's going to be perfect." Sam nodded, wanting to believe her. Maybe Rebecca was right. Maybe it was just nerves, just her mind playing tricks on her because she was about to make the biggest commitment of her life. By 8 a.m., the wedding dress hung on the back of Sam's bedroom door, simple and elegant, white as fresh snow. The flowers had been delivered, white roses and baby's breath filling every room with their sweet scent. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the small chapel on the edge of town. Everything was falling into place exactly as planned. At 8:30 a.m., Sam went upstairs to her childhood bedroom to start getting ready. The room still looked like it had when she was in high school. Band posters on the walls, a bookshelf full of yearbooks, a window that looked out over the backyard. Rebecca and Jenny followed her up, carrying makeup and hairspray. But before they started, Sam walked to the window and looked out. The backyard was empty. The street beyond was quiet. A white van was parked at the corner, 3 houses down, like it had been for the past few days. She'd noticed it before. It never seemed to move. Then she saw it. A small piece of paper tucked under the window frame, wedged in from outside. Her hands trembled as she pulled it out and unfolded it. Written in neat block letters. "You look beautiful today." Sam's breath caught in her throat. The paper fell from her hands. "Sam?" Rebecca's voice pulled her back. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sam picked up the paper and shoved it in her pocket, her heart pounding. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just wedding nerves." Rebecca walked over and looked out the window. "What were you looking at?" "Nothing," Sam lied. "Just that van. It's been there all week." "Probably someone visiting the Hendersons," Rebecca said, squeezing her shoulder. "Come on, let's make you beautiful." "More beautiful," she corrected with a smile. Sam turned away from the window, the note burning in her pocket like a brand. She should tell someone. She should call the police. But what would she say? "Someone left me a note saying I look beautiful on my wedding day?" They'd think she was paranoid. "Yeah," Sam said quietly. "Let's do this." They worked for the next hour, laughing and talking, playing music from a small CD player on the dresser. Patricia came up twice to check on their progress, tearing up both times at the sight of her daughter becoming a bride. For a while, Sam almost forgot about the note, almost forgot about the feeling of being watched, almost forgot about the white van that never moved. She was just a girl getting ready for her wedding day. She didn't know the person who wrote that note was already inside the house. She had no idea she had less than 30 minutes left. At 10 a.m., Patricia went back downstairs to answer the phone. It was Dave's mother, confirming the timeline for the day. They talked for maybe 3 minutes. When Patricia hung up and turned around, the house felt different. Wrong. She heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Rebecca appeared, her face pale, her hands shaking. "Mrs. Rivers," Rebecca said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where's Sam?" Patricia's heart stopped. "What do you mean? She's upstairs with you." "No." Rebecca shook her head, tears starting to form. "Jenny went to get more bobby pins from her room. I turned around to grab the hairspray, and when I looked back, Sam was gone. I thought she went to the bathroom, but she's not there. She's not anywhere upstairs." The 2 women ran up the stairs together. Jenny emerged from her room, confused by the commotion. "What's wrong?" "Sam's missing," Rebecca said. They tore through the upstairs, calling her name. The wedding dress still hung on its hanger, untouched, makeup scattered across the dresser exactly where they'd left it. The CD player had finished its disc and sat silent, but Sam was gone. Patricia ran back downstairs, checking every room. "Samantha!" The house answered with silence. She checked the front door. Sam's blue Honda Civic was still in the driveway. Her purse sat on the kitchen counter. Her phone was charging on the table. Then Patricia saw the back door, standing wide open. She was certain she had locked that door. She always locked it. But someone had opened it from the inside. "Sam!" Patricia screamed, running into the backyard. Nothing. She checked the sides of the house, the street. Nothing. The white van that had been parked 3 houses down for the past week was gone. By 10:15 a.m., Patricia was on the phone with Dave, her hands shaking so badly she could barely dial. "Dave," she said, her voice breaking. "Sam's gone." I was downstairs for 3 minutes and she disappeared. Rebecca and Jenny are here, but Sam's not in the house. The back door was open and—" "I'm coming right now," Dave said, his voice tight with fear. "Call the police. I'll be there in 5 minutes." Patricia called 911 with trembling fingers. Rebecca and Jenny stood in the kitchen, holding each other, both crying. "911, what's your emergency?" "My daughter," Patricia whispered. "My daughter is missing. She was upstairs getting ready for her wedding, and now she's gone." "Ma'am, how old is your daughter?" 24. "And how long has she been missing?" Patricia looked at the clock. 10:17 a.m. 15 minutes, she said. Maybe 20. I don't know. She was just there, and then—" Her voice broke. She looked at the back door, still standing open, and at Rebecca, who was nodding frantically. "I only turned around for a second," Rebecca sobbed. "Just 1 second. She was right there." But somewhere in those 15 minutes, while the CD player went silent and the wedding dress hung waiting, and the white van drove away from Plum Street and disappeared into the Montana morning, Samantha Rivers had been taken. The note in her pocket, the one that said, "You look beautiful today," would be found 3 hours later by investigators searching her room. But by then, the person who wrote it was already 80 miles away. And the day that was supposed to be the happiest of her life had just become the beginning of a 26-year nightmare. Part 2. The Day That Became a Nightmare. Dave Holton's truck skidded to a stop in front of the Rivers house at 10:22 a.m. He was still wearing his work clothes from the auto shop, grease stains on his jeans, his hands shaking as he threw open the door and ran up the front steps. Patricia met him at the door, her face streaked with tears. "Where is she?" Dave demanded, his voice breaking. "Patricia, where's Sam?" "I don't know," Patricia sobbed. "She was just upstairs and then—" Dave didn't wait. He took the stairs 3 at a time. Rebecca and Jenny were in Sam's room, both crying. The wedding dress hung on the door like a ghost. Dave went straight to the window and looked out. "There," he said, pointing. "That white van. It's been parked down the street all week. Sam told me about it. She said it never moved." Rebecca looked up. "It's gone now. It was there this morning when I arrived, but it's gone." Dave's face went white. He spun around. "Someone was watching her. She told me someone was watching her, and I didn't—" His voice cracked. "I didn't believe her." "There was a note," Rebecca said quietly, holding up a sandwich bag with the paper inside. "She found it under her window this morning. I saved it for the police." Dave took the bag, read the words. "You look beautiful today." His hands started shaking. "He was here, this morning. He was right outside her window." By 10:45 a.m., Deputy Marcus Webb arrived. He was calm, methodical, taking out his notepad to write down their statements. Too calm for Dave's liking. "We need to find that van," Dave said immediately. "White van, no plates, been parked on this street for a week." "Sir, I need you to slow down," Webb said. "Let's start from the beginning." "There is no beginning," Dave shouted. "Someone took her, someone who's been watching this house, who left that note, who was driving that van. We're wasting time." "Dave," Patricia said, touching his arm. But Dave pulled away. "How long does it take to set up roadblocks? He could be halfway to Billings by now." Webb's expression hardened. "Mr. Holton, I understand you're upset, but I need to gather information before—" "Before what? Before my fiancé is dead?" The word hung in the air like a physical thing. Patricia let out a sob. Jenny buried her face in Rebecca's shoulder. Webb took a breath. "I'm calling this in right now. We'll get units searching for that van. But I need you to calm down so we can do this properly." At 11:15 a.m., more police arrived. Crime scene techs started dusting the window frame, but it was a neighbor, Mrs. Helen Garrett from 2 houses down, who provided the first real lead. "I saw it," she said, standing in the Rivers driveway, talking to Webb. "The white van. It left around 10:05, maybe 10:10. I was watering my roses and I noticed it because it drove away fast. Too fast for a residential street." "Did you see the driver?" Webb asked. "Not clearly. White male, I think. Baseball cap. But here's the thing." She paused. "I've seen that van before. Not just this week. I've seen it for months. Sometimes it's parked here, sometimes on the next street over. Always the same one." Dave, who had been listening from the porch, came down the steps. "Months? You saw it for months and didn't say anything?" Mrs. Garrett looked defensive. "I thought it was a delivery truck or something. There's nothing unusual about a white van." "Nothing unusual?" Dave's voice rose. "A van that sits in the same spot for hours? That you've seen for months?" "Dave," Webb warned. But Dave ignored him. He turned to the growing crowd of neighbors. "Did anyone else see this van? Anyone?" An older man raised his hand. "I saw it Tuesday morning, early, maybe 6 a.m. I was heading to work, and it was just sitting there, engine off." "And you didn't think that was strange?" Dave asked. The man shrugged uncomfortably. "In this town? Could have been anyone. Could have been the mailman," a woman interrupted. She was in her 30s, holding a toddler. "I saw Tom Whalen getting out of a white van last week. I thought the post office got new vehicles." Webb's head snapped up. "Tom Whalen? The mail carrier?" "Yeah," the woman said. "Why? Is that important?" Dave and Webb locked eyes. Tom Whalen had been delivering mail to Plum Street for 3 years. He had keys to mailboxes. He knew everyone's schedules. He was invisible, part of the background, someone nobody looked at twice. "Where does Whalen live?" Dave asked. "Dave, don't," Webb said. "Let us handle this." "Where does he live?" "I'm not telling you that," Webb said firmly. "We'll bring him in for questioning, but you need to stay out of this." At 12 p.m., Sheriff Howard Crane arrived. He immediately ordered roadblocks on all highways out of Lewistown. The description went out. White van, possibly driven by Thomas Whalen, 32, postal worker, armed and dangerous, possible kidnapping victim inside. But when 2 deputies went to Whalen's apartment on the east side of town, they found it empty. His personal vehicle, a blue sedan, was in the parking lot. His postal uniform was hanging in the closet, but Tom Whalen himself was gone. "He ran," Dave said when he heard the news. "He took her, and he ran." Crane gathered everyone in the Rivers living room at 1 p.m. Dave sat on the arm of the couch, unable to stay still. Patricia clutched Michael's hand. The wedding should have started an hour ago. "We've issued an APB for Thomas Whalen," Crane said. "We're checking his employment records, talking to his co-workers, searching his apartment. The K9 units are tracking from your back door." "But you haven't found him," Dave said flatly. "Not yet." "Not yet," Dave repeated. He stood up. "So what do we do? Just sit here and wait?" "That's exactly what you do," Crane said. "I know this is hard." "Hard?" Dave's laugh was bitter. "My fiancée is out there with some psycho who's been stalking her for God knows how long, and you want me to sit here?" "I want you to let us do our jobs," Crane said, his voice steel. "You go out there playing vigilante. You could contaminate evidence. You could spook him. You could get her killed. Is that what you want?" The words hit Dave like a punch. He sank back down, his head in his hands. At 2 p.m., the exact time Sam should have been saying, "I do," the K9 units returned with their report. They'd tracked Sam's scent 3 blocks to the corner of 5th and Baker. The trail ended there. He had the van waiting, the handler explained. Probably parked there ahead of time. He carried or forced her to this location, put her in the vehicle, and drove away. Which direction? Dave asked. East, toward Route 87. East meant Billings. East meant the interstate. East meant hundreds of miles of highway and 1,000 places to hide. By 3 p.m., the FBI had been notified. By 4 p.m., the first news crew arrived. By 5 p.m., Sam's face was on every television in Montana. But Tom Whalen and his white van had vanished. Dave sat on the front steps as the sun began to set, watching the police come and go. Inside, Patricia was giving another interview to investigators. Neighbors brought food that nobody ate. The wedding guests had long since gone home, their gifts still wrapped, sitting in the corner of the living room like monuments to a future that would never come. Rebecca came out and sat next to him. For a long moment, neither spoke. "She knew," Dave finally said. "She told me someone was watching her. She was locking all the doors. She found footprints under her window, and I told her she was being paranoid." He looked at Rebecca, his eyes red. "I told her it was just wedding stress." "You couldn't have known," Rebecca said softly. "I should have known. I should have listened." He pulled out his phone and stared at the last text Sam had sent him, from yesterday. "Can't wait to marry you tomorrow. Love you forever." Forever had lasted less than 24 hours. As darkness fell over Lewistown, the search continued. Flashlights swept through fields. Helicopters flew overhead with thermal cameras. And somewhere out there, in a white van on an empty highway, was the woman who should have been Dave Holton's wife. The only question now was whether they'd find her in time, or if Tom Whalen, the invisible mailman who nobody had noticed, had already taken her somewhere nobody would ever look. Part 3. The Invisible Man. By Sunday morning, less than 24 hours after Sam's disappearance, Thomas Whalen's face was everywhere. Local news, national news, FBI wanted posters. But the man himself had vanished as completely as his victim. The investigation into Whalen's background revealed a portrait of someone who had mastered the art of being invisible. Detective Sarah Mitchell from the Montana State Police arrived in Lewistown at 7 a.m. Sunday. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed, with 15 years of experience in missing persons cases. She set up a command center in the Fergus County Sheriff's Office and started pulling Whalen's life apart piece by piece. "Tell me about him," she said to Whalen's supervisor at the post office, a man named Gerald Hicks, who looked like he hadn't slept all night. "Tom," Hicks said, shaking his head in disbelief. "He was nobody. I mean that in the nicest way. He showed up on time, did his route, went home, never caused problems, never complained. He was just there." "How long did he work for you?" 3 years. Started in May of '95. "Any disciplinary issues? Complaints from customers?" "None. That's what I can't understand. Tom was the most reliable carrier I had. Old ladies loved him because he'd help carry their packages to the door. He remembered people's birthdays. He was—" Hicks stopped. "God, he was perfect. Too perfect." Mitchell made a note. "Did he ever mention Samantha Rivers specifically?" "Not that I remember, but he delivered to Plum Street 5 days a week. He would have seen her regularly." At the Rivers house, Dave hadn't slept. He'd spent the entire night on the couch, phone in hand, waiting for news that never came. When Mitchell arrived at 9 a.m. to interview him, he looked hollowed out. "I want to help search," Dave said immediately. "Put me on a team. Give me an area. I can't just sit here." "I understand," Mitchell said, "but right now, I need information. Walk me through everything Sam told you about feeling watched." Dave rubbed his face. It started maybe 3 weeks ago. She said she felt like someone was staring at her when she walked to her car. Then she found those footprints under her window. She started locking doors during the day, which wasn't like her. She'd look over her shoulder when we were out. Did she ever mention the mailman? Tom? Dave frowned. No, why would she? He was just the mailman. Exactly, Mitchell said quietly. She pulled out a photograph. It showed Tom Whalen in his postal uniform, smiling at the camera. He was average height, average build, brown hair, forgettable face, the kind of person you'd walk past on the street and never remember. Do you recognize him? Mitchell asked. Dave studied the photo. I've seen him around. He delivered our mail at the shop sometimes, but I never really looked at him. Nobody did, Mitchell said. That was his advantage. By noon, forensic teams had finished processing Whalen's apartment. What they found was disturbing. In a locked drawer in his bedroom, they discovered a collection of photographs. Dozens of them. All of Samantha Rivers. Sam walking to her car. Sam at the library where she worked. Sam grocery shopping. Sam sitting in a coffee shop. The photos spanned months, maybe longer. Some were taken from across the street. Others were taken from much closer, through windows, showing Sam in her own home. But the most disturbing photo was the most recent. It showed Sam in her bedroom, trying on her wedding dress. The photo had been taken from outside her window. On the back, written in neat handwriting, "Soon." Mitchell spread the photos across the conference table at the sheriff's office. Dave, Patricia, and Michael Rivers stared at them in horror. He'd been stalking her for at least 6 months, Mitchell said. Probably longer. These are just the photos he kept. Patricia's hand went to her mouth. 6 months? She was telling us someone was watching her and we thought she was being paranoid. You couldn't have known, Mitchell said. He was careful. Professional, even. Professional? Michael's voice was sharp. He's a mailman. He's a predator, Mitchell corrected, and he chose his victim carefully. Samantha was young, predictable in her routine, living in a small town where people trust their mail carrier. He had legitimate reasons to be on her street every day. He had keys to mailboxes. He could get close without anyone questioning it. Dave picked up one of the photos. It showed Sam laughing, probably talking to someone off camera. She looked happy, alive. Why her? He asked quietly. Why Sam? Mitchell had been asking herself the same question. We're building a profile, but from what we're seeing, Whalen is organized, patient, and calculating. He didn't just snatch her on impulse. He planned this for months. The wedding day wasn't random. It was strategic. He knew the house would be busy, distracted. He knew exactly when to strike. Sheriff Crane entered with another detective. We found his van, abandoned at a rest stop outside Great Falls, 110 miles from here. Wiped clean, no prints, no DNA. But there was blood in the back. Not much, but enough. The room went silent. We're testing it now, Crane continued, but given the amount and location, it's consistent with someone who'd been restrained and injured, not killed. She's alive, Dave said, grabbing onto that word like a lifeline. The blood means she's alive. It means she was alive when she was in that van, Mitchell said carefully. We don't know anything beyond that. But there was something else. Something the detectives had found in Whalen's apartment that they hadn't shared yet. A map. Mitchell pulled it out and spread it on the table. It was a topographical map of Montana marked with dozens of red X's scattered across the state. Abandoned mining camps, empty cabins, remote areas miles from any town. We think he had backup locations planned, Mitchell said. Places he could take her where nobody would think to look. We're checking every one of these markers, but there are over 30 of them spread across 200 miles. Dave stared at the map, at all those red X's marking places where Sam might be alive, might be suffering, might be waiting for rescue that might never come. "He switched vehicles," Crane said. "Had to. The van was found 6 hours after the abduction. He left it there and took something else. We're checking stolen vehicle reports, but in rural Montana there are thousands of old trucks and cars sitting on properties. He could have grabbed any one of them." "So what do we do?" Michael demanded. "Just wait and hope we get lucky?" "We work the case," Mitchell said firmly. "We're interviewing everyone who knew Whalen, checking his phone records, his computer, his financial transactions. Someone knows something. Someone saw something. We will find him." But as Sunday afternoon dragged into evening, the searches of those 30 locations turned up nothing. Empty cabins, abandoned mines, miles of wilderness. No sign of Tom Whalen. No sign of Sam. At 6 p.m., Mitchell called Dave into a private room. "I need to ask you something," she said, "and I need you to be honest with me." Dave's stomach dropped. "What?" "Is there any possibility, any at all, that Sam knew Whalen better than she let on?" "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything, but we found letters in his apartment. Love letters. They're not signed, but they reference specific conversations, specific moments. We need to rule out the possibility that there was some kind of relationship." "No." Dave's voice was flat. "Absolutely not. Sam didn't know him. She would have told me." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." But even as he said it, doubt crept in. Had Sam ever mentioned the mailman? Had she ever said his name? He couldn't remember. He'd been so focused on the wedding, on work, on their future together. Had he missed something? "The letters are detailed," Mitchell continued. "He writes about her smile, her laugh, the way she tucks her hair behind her ear when she's nervous. These aren't observations from across the street. These are intimate details." "He was watching her," Dave said, his voice rising. "For months. You said so yourself. He studied her. That doesn't mean she knew him." "You're right," Mitchell said. "I had to ask." But the question lingered. How much had Whalen really known about Sam? And more importantly, what did he plan to do with her? At 8 p.m., the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit delivered their preliminary profile of Thomas Whalen. "White male, early 30s, organized offender," the agent said over speakerphone. "The stalking behavior and meticulous planning suggest this isn't his first victim. We're checking for similar cases in states where he lived before Montana. He's likely to have a history of obsessive behavior, possibly restraining orders or harassment complaints." "And Samantha?" Patricia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What will he do to her?" There was a pause on the line. "Mrs. Rivers, I can't—" "Tell me the truth." Another pause. "In cases like this, when the offender has invested months of planning and emotional energy into the victim, they typically don't kill them right away. They want to act out a fantasy. They want to keep them." "How long?" "That depends on a lot of factors. But Mrs. Rivers, you need to understand, the longer she's with him, the more dangerous the situation becomes. His fantasy won't match reality. Eventually, he'll become frustrated, angry, and when that happens—" The agent didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. As Sunday night fell on Lewistown, volunteers continued to search. Helicopters flew grid patterns over the wilderness. Police worked through the night, following every lead, no matter how small. But somewhere out there, in a place marked with a red X on a map, or maybe in a place nobody had thought to look, was Samantha Rivers. And the man who had been invisible for so long was now the most wanted person in Montana. The question wasn't just if they would find him. It was whether they would find him in time. Part 4. The Years of Searching. The first week after Sam's disappearance felt like an eternity compressed into days. Every hour brought new leads that went nowhere. Every tip called into the hotline turned out to be a false alarm. On Monday, June 15th, a witness reported seeing a white van at a gas station in Missoula, 200 miles west of Lewistown. By the time police arrived, the van belonged to a plumber with receipts proving he'd been in Washington state during the abduction. On Tuesday, a hiker found a piece of torn fabric near an abandoned mine shaft in the Judith Mountains. For 6 agonizing hours, everyone held their breath. The fabric was white, like Sam's T-shirt. DNA testing would later prove it came from a camping tent, not clothing. On Wednesday, someone called the tip line claiming to have seen Whalen at a truck stop in Wyoming. The FBI descended on the location. The man turned out to be a traveling salesman who looked nothing like Whalen, except for being white and average height. But not every lead was false. On Thursday, a gas station attendant in Cut Bank, Montana, just 40 miles from the Canadian border, came forward with security footage. It showed a white van matching Whalen's pulling in for gas on the afternoon of June 14th, less than 4 hours after Sam's abduction. The driver wore a baseball cap pulled low, but the timestamp and location were crucial. Whalen had been heading north, toward Canada. By Friday, the searches of all 30 locations marked on Whalen's map had been completed. Every abandoned cabin, every mine, every remote structure, empty, all of them. But the gas station footage gave them a direction, a trail to follow. Dave spent those days like a ghost in his own life. He'd taken leave from the auto shop. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything except Sam. He drove the roads around Lewistown for hours, searching the ditches, the tree lines, anywhere she might have been dumped or hidden. On Friday, exactly 1 week after the wedding that never happened, Detective Mitchell called him into the sheriff's office. "We found another vehicle," she said, "a 1985 Ford pickup stolen from a ranch 40 miles outside Great Falls. It was abandoned at the Canadian border." Dave's heart jumped. "Canada? He took her to Canada?" "We don't know. Border Patrol has no record of him crossing, but there are dozens of unmonitored forest roads. He could have driven across and we'd never know." She paused. "Dave, I need you to prepare yourself for the possibility that he got her out of the country." "Then we search Canada." "We are. The RCMP has been notified, but Dave, if he crossed the border, this case just became exponentially harder." Dave slumped in his chair. "She's alive. I know she's alive." Mitchell's expression was careful. "The blood we found in the van, the DNA came back. It's Sam's. The amount suggests a head wound, maybe from being struck or from hitting something during the abduction. It's not fatal, but what? If she's injured and hasn't received medical care, that's a problem. It's been a week. A week. 7 days since he'd last heard Sam's voice. 168 hours since someone had taken her from her own home. 10,080 minutes of not knowing if she was alive, if she was hurt, if she was calling for him. "What do we do now?" he asked quietly. "We keep looking. We keep working leads, and we wait." The waiting was the worst part. As June turned into July, the massive search efforts began to scale back. The FBI maintained their investigation, but the helicopters stopped flying daily. The volunteer search parties dwindled from hundreds to dozens to a handful of dedicated locals who refused to give up. The media attention, which had been intense for the first 2 weeks, began to fade. "Bride vanishes on wedding day" became old news, replaced by other tragedies, other headlines. But in Lewistown, nobody forgot. The Rivers family held weekly vigils at the high school. Patricia set up a command center in her living room, covering the walls with maps, timelines, photographs. She tracked every tip, every sighting, every piece of information, no matter how small. Michael threw money at the problem, hiring private investigators, offering a $50,000 reward for information, putting up billboards across 3 states with Sam's face and the words, "Missing, please help bring her home." And Dave couldn't let go. He drove to Great Falls and searched the area where the pickup truck had been stolen. He talked to every ranch hand, every gas station attendant, every person who might have seen something. He stood at the Canadian border and stared at the forest roads disappearing into the trees, wondering which one Whalen had taken. On August 12th, 2 months after the abduction, a fisherman found something in the Clark Fork River, 85 miles northwest of Lewistown. It was a ring. The call came to the Rivers house at 4 p.m. Patricia answered, listened for 10 seconds, and dropped the phone. Michael caught her as her knees gave out. Dave was there within minutes. The ring was in an evidence bag on the kitchen table, small, gold, with 2 intertwined hearts engraved on the band. It was Sam's promise ring, the one Dave had given her when they first started dating 3 years ago. She wore it every day, on her right hand. "Where?" Dave asked, his voice hollow. "Clark Fork River," Sheriff Crane said. "About 30 miles from the Canadian border. It was caught in some rocks near the bank." "Was there anything else? Any other evidence?" "Not yet. We've got divers searching the area, dogs working both banks. If there's anything else there, we'll find it." But they didn't find anything else. No body, no clothes, no other signs of Sam, just the ring. The discovery opened up a horrible new question. Was Whalen trying to send a message, or had Sam managed to drop it, hoping someone would find it? Was it a clue to where she was, or was it evidence that she was already gone? Mitchell had the ring analyzed. There was DNA on it, Sam's, but also traces of river sediment that suggested it had been in the water for weeks, possibly since shortly after the abduction. "If she dropped it deliberately," Mitchell said, "she was trying to leave us a trail. This area near the Canadian border, it's consistent with our theory that Whalen headed north." "So we search north," Dave said. "We are searching north. But Dave, you need to understand, this is thousands of square miles of wilderness, dense forest, mountains, remote cabins. Even with every resource we have, we could search for years and never find them." Years. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. By October, 4 months after the abduction, the investigation had gone cold. The FBI maintained an open case file, but the active investigation wound down. There were no new leads, no sightings of Whalen, no trace of Sam beyond that single ring in a river 85 miles from home. Dave couldn't accept it. He quit his job at the auto shop and dedicated himself full-time to searching. He worked with Patricia, following up on every tip that came through their hotline. He drove thousands of miles, checking every abandoned property, every remote location where someone might hide. But as fall turned to winter, even Dave had to admit the truth he'd been avoiding. Sam was gone. Either Whalen had hidden her somewhere nobody would ever find, or he'd killed her and disposed of her body so well that it might never be recovered. On what would have been their first wedding anniversary, June 14th, 1999, Dave stood in the cemetery where Sam's family had placed a memorial stone. Not a grave, because there was no body, just a marker that said, "Samantha Marie Rivers, 1974-1998. Beloved daughter, sister, friend. Gone too soon, but never forgotten, the date of death wasn't certain. They'd put 1998 because that's when she disappeared. But Dave knew, somewhere deep in his gut, that Sam might still be out there, alive, waiting for someone to find her. The case remained officially open. Whalen remained on the FBI's most wanted list. But as 1999 became 2000 and 2000 became 2001, hope began to fade. Patricia never stopped searching. She maintained the command center in her living room. She followed every lead, no matter how unlikely. She called Detective Mitchell once a week to check if there had been any developments. There never were. Rebecca Walsh, Sam's best friend who had been there that morning, couldn't forgive herself. She'd been the last person to see Sam alive. She'd turned around for just a second, and Sam was gone. The guilt ate at her. She attended every vigil, helped with every search party, but eventually, like Dave, she had to leave Lewistown. The memories were too painful. She moved to Seattle in 2002, but she still called Patricia every year on June 14th. Neither of them ever stopped hoping. Michael had spent over $200,000 on private investigators and rewards. None of it brought Sam back. And Dave eventually moved away from Lewistown. He couldn't bear to drive past the Rivers house anymore, couldn't stand seeing Sam's face on the missing posters that still hung in store windows years after she vanished. He never married, never even dated. How could he, when his heart was still waiting for a woman who might be dead, who might be suffering somewhere, who might be calling his name in the dark? By 2010, 12 years after the abduction, most people had given up hope. The case was cold. The trail was dead. Thomas Whalen had vanished as completely as his victim. Then, in March of that year, hope flickered back to life. A man matching Whalen's description was arrested in Spokane, Washington, for stalking a woman outside a grocery store. When police ran his fingerprints, they found something interesting. He'd been using a fake ID. His real name was Thomas Winslow, close enough to Thomas Whalen to raise flags. The call came to the Rivers house on a Tuesday morning. Patricia's hands shook as she listened to Detective Mitchell on the phone. "We think we might have him," Mitchell said. "He's the right age, right build. He's been living under an assumed name. We're bringing him in for questioning." For 72 hours, the Rivers family lived in suspended animation. Was this it? After 12 years, had they finally found him? Dave drove back to Lewistown for the first time in 5 years. He sat in the sheriff's office with Patricia and Michael, waiting for news, waiting to hear that the man who had destroyed their lives was finally in custody. On Friday, Mitchell walked into the room. One look at her face told them everything. "It's not him," she said quietly. "We ran DNA, compared dental records. Thomas Winslow is a stalker, and he'll go to prison for what he did. But he's not Thomas Whalen." The hope that had sustained them for 3 days crumbled in an instant. Patricia wept. Michael put his head in his hands, and Dave walked out of the sheriff's office and drove straight back to wherever he'd been living, because staying in Lewistown for even one more day was more than he could bear. It was the last time anyone seriously thought they'd found Whalen. After that, the years blurred together. 2010 became 2015. 2015 became 2020. The case remained officially open, but nobody was actively working it anymore. Whalen remained on the FBI's most wanted list, but his page was buried under hundreds of more recent cases. After that, the years blurred together. 2010 became 2015. 2015 became 2020. The case remained officially open, but nobody was actively working it anymore. Whalen remained on the FBI's most wanted list, but his page was buried under hundreds of more recent cases. Patricia was 72 years old in 2024. Michael had passed away in 2019, his heart giving out, some said from a broken heart that never healed. Rebecca was living in Seattle with a family of her own, but she still called every June 14th. And Dave was somewhere out there, living a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. But Patricia never took down the command center, never stopped hoping. She'd told Michael before he died, "I'll search until the day I die. She's my daughter. I won't give up." And then, on a cold morning in February 2024, her phone rang. It was Detective Sarah Mitchell, now retired, but she'd kept the Rivers family number all these years. Her voice was shaking. "Patricia," she said, "you need to sit down. Something's been found." In the Purcell Mountains of British Columbia, just across the Canadian border, a hiker had discovered something in a sealed cave that had been hidden for over 2 decades. It was a backpack, weathered, faded, but preserved by the dry conditions of the cave. Inside was a Montana driver's license, a promise ring on a chain, and a small notebook with pages of writing. The name on the license was Samantha Marie Rivers. And suddenly, after 26 years of silence, the case that had haunted Lewistown, Montana, was about to be solved. The notebook contained dates, locations, and a name written over and over in increasingly desperate handwriting: Thomas Whalen. Sam had left them a trail. All these years, hidden in a cave on the Canadian side of the border, she'd left evidence that would finally bring the truth to light. Patricia held the phone and wept. But this time, they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of hope. Part 5. The Truth Comes to Light. The call that changed everything came on February 8, 2024. A hiker named Marcus Chen had been exploring the Purcell Mountains in British Columbia, an area known for its limestone caves and rugged terrain. He'd been documenting cave systems for a geology blog when he noticed something unusual: a cave entrance that had been deliberately sealed with rocks and branches, then hidden behind years of overgrowth. Curious, Chen spent 3 hours clearing the entrance. When he finally crawled inside with his headlamp, he found himself in a small chamber, maybe 8 feet across. The air was dry, the temperature stable. Perfect conditions for preservation. That's when he saw the backpack. It was wedged into a crevice in the rock wall, partially hidden but not completely concealed. Faded blue fabric, rotting straps, but remarkably intact given the decades it had been there. Chen opened it carefully. Inside, a Montana driver's license, a promise ring on a silver chain, a small spiral notebook with a purple cover, and a photograph: a young woman in a wedding dress, smiling at the camera. Chen photographed everything, then called the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Within hours, the RCMP had contacted the FBI. Within a day, Detective Sarah Mitchell, retired but still consulting on the Rivers case, was on a plane to British Columbia. And within 48 hours, Patricia Rivers received the phone call she'd been waiting 26 years to get. "We found something," Mitchell said. "Patricia, I think we finally found something real." The backpack was transported to an FBI forensic lab in Seattle. Every item was carefully documented, photographed, and analyzed. The driver's license was definitely Sam's. The photo matched. The issue date was 1996, which meant Sam had been carrying it the day she was taken. The promise ring was confirmed by Dave. He'd given it to Sam on their 1-year anniversary. She'd worn it every day until she vanished. But it was the notebook that broke the case wide open. Inside were 43 pages of writing. The first entry was dated June 15, 1998, the day after Sam's abduction. The last entry was dated August 4, 1998, 51 days later. Sam had kept a journal of her captivity. The entries were brief, written in pencil that had faded with time but was still legible. The first page read, June 15, 1998. "I don't know where I am. Tom brought me here in the van. We drove for hours. He says we're in Canada. He says we're going to be happy here. He says I'll learn to love him. I'm in a cabin. The windows are boarded up. There's a chain on my ankle. He took my phone, my keys, Everything. But I hid this notebook in my jacket pocket, and he didn't find it. If someone finds this, please tell my family I love them. Tell Dave I'm sorry. My name is Samantha Rivers, and I was taken from Lewistown, Montana on June 14th, 1998, by Thomas Whalen. Mitchell read the journal aloud to Patricia, Dave, and Rebecca via conference call. They'd all dropped everything to be part of this moment. Dave had driven from Oregon, where he'd been living. Rebecca had flown in from Seattle. They sat in the FBI field office in Billings, listening to Sam's voice from beyond the grave. As Mitchell read, Sam's ordeal unfolded in heartbreaking detail. The cabin was remote, somewhere deep in the British Columbia wilderness. Whalen had prepared it months in advance, stocked with food, supplies, everything needed for a long-term stay. He'd chained Sam to a radiator and told her they were going to start a new life together. "He talks to me like we're married," Sam wrote on June 20th. "He calls me his wife. He made me a ring out of wire. He says once I accept our love, he'll remove the chain. I tried to escape once. He caught me. I won't describe what he did." There were long gaps between entries when Sam was too frightened or hurt to write, but she kept documenting locations, details about the cabin, anything that might help someone find her. July 2nd, we went outside today, first time in weeks. He let me walk around but kept a rope tied to my wrist. I saw mountains, thick forest. We're definitely in Canada. There's a lake maybe half a mile away. I heard a plane overhead and tried to scream, but he covered my mouth. He was angry after that. Didn't let me outside for a week. July 15th. He's getting frustrated. He says I'm not trying hard enough to love him. He says if I don't start acting like a proper wife, he'll have to correct me. I'm scared. I try to play along, but I can't. I can't pretend to love the man who took everything from me. July 28th. I found out where we are. Tom had a map in his truck. We're near a town called Cranbrook, B.C., about 40 miles into the wilderness. The cabin is on Crown land, public property that nobody monitors. He chose this place carefully. Nobody's coming. Nobody's going to find me unless I do something. Dave's hands were shaking as he listened. 26 years ago, while he'd been searching Montana, Sam had been chained in a cabin 40 miles into Canadian wilderness, writing these desperate messages in a notebook. The final entries were the most chilling. August 1st. I have a plan. Tom trusts me more now. He thinks I'm starting to accept our marriage. He let me help him carry supplies yesterday. I managed to grab this backpack and hide it under my jacket. Inside is this notebook, my driver's license, the promise ring Dave gave me. Tomorrow, Tom is taking me to see a cave system he found. He wants to show me something special. I'm going to try to hide the backpack there. If someone finds it, maybe they'll know what happened to me. Maybe my family will have answers. August 2nd. I did it. While Tom was exploring deeper in the cave, I shoved the backpack into a crevice and covered it with rocks. He didn't see. I left my license, the ring, this journal. If you're reading this, please tell my family I fought. Tell them I didn't give up. Tell Dave I love him and I'm sorry our forever was so short. August 4th. This is my last entry. I'm writing this in the cabin. Tom found out I took the backpack. He's furious. He says I betrayed him. He says he's been too lenient, too kind. He's loading the truck right now. He says we're leaving, going somewhere even more remote. I don't think I'll survive wherever he's taking me. If you found my backpack, please find him. His name is Thomas Whalen. He was a mailman in Lewistown, Montana. He has a scar on his left hand from a childhood accident. He drives a blue Ford pickup, license plate number. The entry ended there. The pencil had trailed off the page, as if Sam had been interrupted mid-sentence. The room was silent for a long moment after Mitchell finished reading. "That's it," Mitchell said quietly. "That's the last entry." Patricia was crying. Rebecca had her head in her hands. And Dave was staring at nothing, processing the fact that Sam had been alive for at least 51 days after she was taken. 51 days of hell that he couldn't stop, couldn't prevent, couldn't even know about. "The cave is approximately 8 miles from Cranbrook, British Columbia," Mitchell continued. "Canadian authorities are searching the area now for any sign of the cabin Sam described. We've also got teams looking into property records, checking for any connection between Whalen and that region." "What about DNA?" Dave asked, his voice hollow. "The backpack, the notebook. Can you get DNA from it?" "We're testing everything. But Dave, you need to understand. This was 26 years ago. Even if we find the cabin, even if we find evidence Whalen was there, it doesn't tell us where he is now." "Or where Sam is," Patricia added softly. "Or where Sam is," Mitchell agreed. But the journal had given them more than just information. It had given them a location, a timeline, and most importantly, it had given them proof that Sam had fought to leave a trail. Within 72 hours, the RCMP had found it. The cabin was exactly where Sam had described, 42 miles northeast of Cranbrook, hidden in dense forest on Crown land. It had been abandoned for decades. The roof had partially collapsed. Animals had nested in the corners. But the radiator Sam had been chained to was still there, along with rust stains on the floor that DNA testing would later confirm was Sam's blood. They also found other things, disturbing things. A makeshift bedroom with a mattress still covered in rotting fabric, chains bolted to the floor and walls, a box of wire rings that Whalen had apparently crafted, and most chilling of all, photos. Dozens of them, Polaroids that had somehow survived the years. They showed Sam in that cabin, fear in her eyes, wearing clothes that weren't hers. But they didn't find Sam's body. They didn't find any evidence of what happened after August 4th, 1998. "He moved her," Mitchell explained to the family. "Just like the journal said, he took her somewhere else after he discovered she'd hidden the backpack." "Where?" Dave demanded. "Where did he take her?" "We're working on it. We've expanded the search radius to 200 miles. We're checking every property Whalen might have had access to, every remote location that fits the profile." But as days turned into weeks, the trail went cold again. They had the cabin. They had the journal. They had proof of what Whalen had done. But they didn't have Whalen, and they didn't have Sam. Until March 15th, 2024, when everything changed one final time. A DNA match came back from a routine database search, not from the cabin, not from the backpack, from a completely unexpected source. In 2023, the British Columbia government had launched a program to identify remains found over the past 3 decades, John and Jane Does, who'd never been identified. One of those cases was a set of remains found in 2001 by hunters in a remote area near Fernie, BC, approximately 80 miles from the cabin. The remains had been there for years, possibly decades. They'd been catalogued, DNA extracted, and entered into a database. But in 1998, when Sam disappeared, DNA technology wasn't what it is today. The remains had never been matched to any missing persons case, until now. The DNA was a match to samples taken from Sam's hairbrush, which Patricia had kept all these years. The remains found in 2001 were Samantha Rivers. She'd been dead for over 23 years. Part 6. The Fatal Mistake. The confirmation that the remains were Samantha Rivers brought closure, but it also reignited fury. She'd been found in 2001, 23 years ago. Her body had been lying in a morgue, catalogued as Jane Doe number 47, while her family spent 2 more decades searching for her. While Patricia maintained her command center, while Dave drove himself into isolation, while Rebecca called every June 14th with hope in her voice. If the DNA technology of 2024 had existed in 2001, Sam would have been identified immediately. Her family would have had answers. They could have buried her properly. They could have begun to heal. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what Detective Mitchell discovered when she started reviewing the original 1998 investigation files with fresh eyes and new information from Sam's journal. On March 20th, 2024, Mitchell called an emergency meeting at the FBI field office in Billings. Patricia, Dave, Rebecca, Sheriff Crane, now retired, and representatives from the RCMP and FBI filled the conference room. Mitchell stood at the head of the table, and her expression was grim. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and you're not going to like it." She pulled up a photograph on the screen. It showed the original investigation board from 1998, covered with photos, timelines, and lists of people who had been interviewed. "This is everyone who was questioned in the first 48 hours after Sam's disappearance," Mitchell said. "Family members, friends, neighbors, co-workers from the library. We talked to 247 people in the first week alone." She highlighted a section of the board. "This is the list of people who had regular access to the Rivers home and neighborhood. Mail carriers, delivery drivers, utility workers, meter readers, anyone who had a legitimate reason to be on Plum Street regularly." Dave leaned forward. "Tom Whalen is on that list." "Yes," Mitchell said. "He's on the list. He was interviewed on June 16th, 1998. 2 days after Sam disappeared." The room went silent. "What?" Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. Mitchell pulled up another document. "Interview summary, Thomas Whalen, age 32, mail carrier for the Lewistown Post Office, interviewed by Deputy Marcus Webb at 2 p.m. on June 16th. She began to read. "Deputy Webb. Mr. Whalen, you delivered mail to Plum Street 5 days a week, is that correct?" Whalen. "Yes, sir. Have for 3 years." Webb. "Did you notice anything unusual on the morning of June 14th? Whalen. "No, sir. It was a Saturday, so I wasn't working. I don't deliver on weekends." Webb. "Did you know Samantha Rivers?" Whalen. "Only to say hello to. She was always friendly when she got the mail." "Terrible thing. What happened?" Webb. "Where were you on Saturday morning between 8 and 11 a.m.? Whalen. "Home, sleeping in. It was my day off." Webb. "Can anyone confirm that?" Whalen. "No, sir. I live alone. But my neighbor might have seen my truck in the driveway." Mitchell stopped reading and looked up. "The interview lasted 7 minutes. Webb noted that Whalen was cooperative, showed appropriate concern, and had no visible injuries or signs of suspicious behavior. His truck, a blue Ford pickup, was parked at his apartment complex. His postal van was at the post office, secured and accounted for." "Wait," Dave said, his face going red. "His truck was there, but the white van wasn't registered to him," Mitchell finished. "We now know from the Canadian investigation that Whalen had purchased a second vehicle, a white utility van, under a false name 6 months before the abduction. He kept it in a storage unit outside of town. But in 1998 we didn't know that. We didn't dig deep enough." Sheriff Crane, now 70 years old, spoke up. "We cleared him. We cleared him because he was a mailman, because he had access to the neighborhood as part of his job, because he seemed normal." "You didn't just clear him," Mitchell said, her voice hard. "You never seriously investigated him. You checked his alibi, which was that he was home alone, unverified, and you moved on. You never searched his apartment, never checked his financial records, never looked for other vehicles registered to him or to fake names. You never obtained a warrant for his phone records or his computer." The words hung in the air like an accusation. "But the white van," Patricia said desperately. "The neighbors saw a white van. We knew about it from day one." "You did," Mitchell agreed. "And you looked for white vans. You checked every postal vehicle, every delivery company, every contractor in the area. But you never connected the white van to Tom Whalen because he drove a blue pickup truck to work every day. The van was invisible because it wasn't officially his." Dave stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're saying if someone had searched his apartment in June of 1998, we would have found evidence?" Mitchell nodded slowly. "Based on what we found in the Canadian cabin, yes. Whalen kept photographs of Sam. He had maps of remote locations. He had detailed plans. If someone had searched his apartment thoroughly, they would have found something. But he wasn't considered a serious suspect because he was the mailman," Dave finished, his voice shaking with rage. "Because nobody looks at the mailman." "That's exactly right," Mitchell said. "Thomas Whalen was invisible. He had keys to mailboxes. He was on Plum Street 5 days a week. People trusted him. Old ladies asked him to carry their packages inside. He knew everyone's schedules, everyone's routines. He was part of the background, and that made him the perfect predator." Rebecca spoke up, her voice trembling. "If you'd investigated him properly in 1998, would Sam still be alive?" The question everyone had been thinking, but nobody wanted to ask. Mitchell took a breath. "I can't answer that definitively, but based on the journal entries, Sam was alive for at least 51 days after her abduction. If Whalen had been arrested in the first week, if his vehicles had been searched, if the cabin had been found. Yes, there's a strong possibility she would have survived." Patricia let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. Michael would have been here for this meeting, Dave thought. Michael would have demanded answers, would have threatened lawsuits, would have burned down the sheriff's office with his rage. But Michael was dead, his heart broken by 26 years of not knowing. "There's more," Mitchell said, "and this is why I called this meeting." She pulled up another photograph, a driver's license. The photo showed a man in his late 50s with gray hair, weathered skin, and tired eyes. "This is Thomas Whalen today. Or rather, this is Roland Hayes, age 58, currently living in Kelowna, British Columbia." The room erupted. "You found him?" Dave said. "You found him and you're just now telling us?" "We found him 3 days ago," Mitchell said, "and we've been surveilling him while we built our case. We wanted to be absolutely certain before we moved." "How?" Patricia asked. "How did you find him after 26 years?" "The cabin," Mitchell explained. "Once we found it, we were able to pull DNA evidence from multiple surfaces. We ran it through every database we had access to. 2 days ago, we got a hit. In 2019, a man named Roland Hayes was arrested in Kelowna for a domestic disturbance. His DNA was entered into the Canadian criminal database. It matched DNA from the cabin." Mitchell brought up another photo. "This is Roland Hayes's home in Kelowna. He's lived there for 18 years, since 2006. He works as a maintenance supervisor for a property management company. He's been married twice. Currently single. No children. To everyone who knows him, he's a quiet, reliable man who keeps to himself." "The Invisible Man," Dave said bitterly. "Exactly. He changed his name legally in 1999, claiming he wanted a fresh start after a difficult divorce. There was no divorce. It was a cover story. But it worked. Roland Hayes has no criminal record beyond that one domestic disturbance charge. He pays his taxes. He goes to work. He's lived a normal life for 2 decades while Sam's family suffered. "Where is he now?" Dave demanded. "In custody," Mitchell said. "The RCMP arrested him this morning at 6 a.m. He's currently being held in Kelowna, pending extradition to Montana. He will face charges of kidnapping, aggravated assault, and first-degree murder." "Did he confess?" Rebecca asked. Mitchell's expression darkened. "He lawyered up immediately, but we don't need a confession. We have Sam's journal. We have DNA evidence from the cabin. We have the remains. We have photographs he kept. The case is solid." Patricia spoke up, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "I want to see him." "Mrs. Rivers, I want to see him," Patricia repeated. "I want to look him in the eye. I want him to know that we never stopped looking, that Sam never stopped fighting, that he didn't win." Mitchell nodded slowly. "I'll arrange it." On March 25, 2024, Patricia Rivers sat in a witness room at the Kelowna RCMP headquarters, separated from Thomas Whalen by bulletproof glass. He looked old. That was the first thing she thought. Old and ordinary and tired. This was the monster who had haunted her nightmares for 26 years? This gray-haired man who looked like someone's grandfather? Whalen sat down and looked at her. No emotion, no remorse, nothing. Patricia picked up the phone. After a moment, Whalen picked up his. "Do you know who I am?" Patricia asked. "Yes," Whalen said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Good. Then you know I'm going to be at every court hearing, every deposition, every parole hearing for the rest of your miserable life. I'm going to make sure you never forget what you did to my daughter." "She was happy," Whalen said suddenly. Patricia's blood ran cold. "What?" "Samantha, she was happy with me. At first she fought, but eventually she understood. We were meant to be together." "You murdered her." "No." Whalen shook his head. "She died in an accident. We were moving to a new location and she tried to run. It was dark. She fell down a ravine. I tried to save her, but—" "You're a liar," Patricia said, her voice shaking. "You're a liar and a murderer, and I hope you rot in prison for the rest of your life." "You don't understand," Whalen continued as if she hadn't spoken. "I loved her. I watched her for months. I learned everything about her. I knew what made her happy, what made her laugh. I gave her a home. I gave her everything." "You gave her nothing," Patricia said. "You took everything, and now everyone will know what you are." She hung up the phone and walked out of the room. She didn't look back. On April 2, 2024, Thomas Whalen was formally charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and aggravated sexual assault. The trial was set for September. On June 14, 2024, what would have been Sam and Dave's 26th wedding anniversary, Samantha Rivers was finally laid to rest in Lewistown, Montana. The funeral was attended by hundreds. Patricia, now 72, stood at the gravestone with Dave on one side and Rebecca on the other. The stone read, "Samantha Marie Rivers, April 3, 1974, August 1998. Beloved daughter, sister, friend. She fought until the end. She never gave up, and neither did we." In September 2024, Thomas Whalen pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing, Patricia Rivers gave a victim impact statement. "My daughter was 24 years old when you took her," she said, looking directly at Whalen. "She was going to be married. She was going to have children. She was going to have a life. You took all of that because you decided you loved her. But you didn't love her. Love doesn't chain people up. Love doesn't imprison them. Love doesn't murder them and throw their body in the wilderness like garbage." She paused, composing herself. "You almost won. You almost got away with it. For 26 years you lived free while we suffered, but you made one mistake. You underestimated my daughter. She left us a trail. She fought back the only way she could. And because of her courage, because she refused to let you erase her, we found the truth. We found you. And now you'll spend the rest of your life in a cage, just like you kept her in one. Patricia looked at the judge. I hope he lives to be 100. I hope every single day in that prison reminds him of what he did. And I hope he dies knowing that he failed. Because Sam won. Even in death, she won. The courtroom was silent as Patricia sat down. Dave reached over and squeezed her hand. Thomas Whalen showed no emotion as he was led away in handcuffs. He would spend the rest of his life in Montana State Prison, in a 6-by-8-foot cell that he would never leave. The Invisible Man was finally visible to everyone. And Samantha Rivers, 26 years after she vanished on what should have been the happiest day of her life, finally had justice. Epilogue. The investigation into the 1998 case led to significant reforms in how law enforcement handles missing persons cases. The Rivers Protocol, as it became known, requires thorough investigation of all individuals with regular access to a victim's location, regardless of their profession or perceived trustworthiness. Deputy Marcus Webb, who conducted the original 7-minute interview with Whalen, retired in 2002. He gave a statement to the press in 2024. I failed Samantha Rivers. I failed her family. I looked at Tom Whalen and I saw a mailman, not a suspect. That's a mistake I'll carry for the rest of my life. Dave Holton never married. He became an advocate for families of missing persons, working with the FBI to develop better investigative protocols. He still lives in Oregon, but returns to Lewistown every June 14th to visit Sam's grave. Rebecca Walsh established a scholarship fund in Sam's name at Lewistown High School for students studying criminal justice. Sam left us clues, she said. She fought back. I want to make sure the next generation of investigators knows how to see those clues. Patricia Rivers passed away peacefully in her sleep on December 3, 2025, 19 months after her daughter's remains were finally identified. She was 73 years old. At her funeral, Dave gave the eulogy. Patricia never gave up, he said. For 26 years, she searched. She called. She hoped. She refused to let Sam be forgotten. And in the end, it was that refusal to give up that brought Sam home. Patricia can rest now, knowing her daughter has justice. Patricia was buried next to her daughter. Her stone reads simply, Patricia Ann Rivers, 1952-2025. She never stopped searching and she never stopped loving. The case of Samantha Rivers remains one of the most comprehensive examples of how cold cases can be solved decades later through persistence, new technology, and the courage of victims who fight back, even in the darkest circumstances. Tom Whalen, now prisoner, 847362 at Montana State Prison, will be eligible for compassionate release only when he's on his deathbed. He's currently 60 years old and in good health. He has many years left to think about what he did. And Samantha Rivers, the bride who vanished on her wedding day, finally rests in peace, knowing that her fight, her journal, her hidden backpack, her refusal to let him erase her, brought him to justice. She never gave up, and neither did the people who loved her.